So, you know, don't get too nervous on me. Just waiting to get up streaming on all of our platforms here. And I think we are. Yep, we are. Welcome to a special live edition of the Big Fundamental Spurs podcast brought to you by Ken's Five. My name is Tom Petrini. I'm so excited to be here with all of you hanging out right now. Excuse the jacket. It's just a little drafty in my house. But seriously, though, the last time the Spurs had a draft pick this high was 1997. They took a senior out of Wake Forest, swimmer from the islands, a senior, low ceiling, silly move on their part. But it worked out for Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich. And we're here now after 2 decades of pretty much unmatched success in organized American professional team sports. But this was the worst Spurs season since that one. And accordingly, the Spurs have wound up with their best draft pick since they took Tim Duncan. Oh, hey, Slats, how you doing? So it's going to be, any way this shakes out for Spurs fans, it's going to be a pretty good situation, right? Because worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, Spurs wind up with the 14th pick, and that's almost impossible. That would still be their highest draft asset in a very long time. And we know how the Spurs develop talent. We know the way that they draft and find talent. So this is an exciting night for Spurs fans. I'm excited to talk about the players in this draft. A lot of people have said that this is a weak draft. I kind of disagree, for the Spurs at least. In terms of getting a star power player, sure, yeah, this might be kind of a weak draft class for that. But if you're looking for a very solid wing player or big man, there are plenty of guys in this draft that could pan out very nicely for the Spurs. All have different areas where they need development, but most of these kids are 19 years old. Most 19-year-olds need development in certain areas, in basketball and other areas. So any way this turns out, the Spurs, it would be hard for them to miss if they picked a combo forward in this range. I'm excited to talk to you guys, hear your ideas about who you want the Spurs to draft. But honestly, it doesn't make much sense for us to do that until we know where the Spurs are picking. And we'll know relatively soon in this draft lottery whether the Spurs are picking somewhere 11 to 14 or somewhere 10 spots up at 1 to 4. So basically how this is going to work is the Spurs have a 77% chance-ish to get the number 11 pick. They don't have any chance at all at picks 5 through 10. They have about a 10% chance total at landing in the top 4. The rest of the percentage is the chance that they slide back 1 or 2 spots from 11. So in all likelihood, we'll be talking about who will be in the Spurs range when they pick at 11. But there is a possibility that the 11th pick is announced and the San Antonio Spurs haven't been called. And if that's the case, then we're going to be talking about who the Spurs are going to be taking at the top of this draft, somewhere in those top 4 picks. So anyway it shakes out, I'm excited to talk about it with you guys, hang out with you guys. I don't know what you guys are doing superstition-wise. I don't know if you're superstitious people. I was gonna get some incense, but I didn't want to go out to the store. We've got some candles here. Gonna light some candles. Get good vibes going in here. Good smells. Just positivity. Let go of the negative energy that this Spurs season may have brought you. It was certainly not the best. And if you want to talk about that before we get going here, we'll see how quickly they start announcing these picks. But Evan Klosky and I, did a good 2 hours on the post-mortem of the Spurs season where we broke down who's going to probably be here for the Spurs next year, who might not be, what everybody's role looks like. And you know, we're about to see now what the next part of the future is going to look like. But if you want to look at that part of the recent history there, that's a good breakdown for you. That's on our YouTube and on our website. So thank you everybody who's been hanging out with us. It's been really fun doing these live with you when something's going on. And yeah, the draft lottery. This is the first draft lottery this millennium for the San Antonio Spurs. Pretty crazy. If you guys want to get some comments in the chat, let me know some players who you want to know more about. You know, obviously we don't know where the Spurs are going to pick, but they might trade up, they might trade down. We have no idea. So let me know who you want to talk about. Just going to get all of my things open here. I'll be perfectly candid. I don't watch too much college basketball during the season. I've been mainly looking at, you know, tape and draft profile stuff. I see Obi Toppin in the comments. I love Obi Toppin. I love watching him. He looks on offense. He looks like, you know, he looks like Blake Griffin offensively, and he can stroke an outside shot too. He needs a lot of work defensively, and I know that the Spurs would probably have to beat that into him. He'd probably spend some time in Austin. But talk about a guy who you would love to see paired with this young Spurs core of guards, a true four who spaces the floor and does a little bit of everything offensively, sets good screens. I would love to see Obi Toppin play with these young guys. I saw Isaac Okoro, little undersized for me. I don't want the Spurs drafting anybody under 6'6" in this draft. He's a good enough wing defender though that, I mean, he is 6'6". So I think Okoro would be a decent fit. And I see Saddiq Bey. I haven't done too much in Saddiq Bey. I think for where the Spurs are picking, there will be better players available at the position. So I haven't done too much looking into Saddiq Bey, but I do like his game. He played at Villanova, right? He was all right. I think there are other guys. Precious is a prospect that I've been looking at a lot. Devin Vassell, probably the best 3-and-D guy in this draft, 6'6", 6'7"-ish, plus wingspan, dead-eye shooter. I think for the Spurs, you either have to go with a guy like that, or you have to go with a big man who is either a dynamic offensive threat or a lockdown wing defender with the potential to improve whatever area he's lacking in. So it's, and as far as players like that go, between the heights of 6'7", 6'11", this draft has a bunch of guys who can make an impact as a role player. Don't have to do too much. And, you know, the Spurs are not going to be asking whoever they draft in this to be doing too much. He's probably going to spend time in Austin. You know, it's, the Spurs aren't as good as they've been in years, but they proved in the bubble that they have a really solid group of guys moving forward that they can sustainably win basketball games with. So whoever comes in this draft, even though he's going to be their best pick in decades, he's still not going to have a tremendous load on his shoulders. He's going to be able to develop. And all of these guys, they look like they have an NBA talent in, say, shooting or driving and facilitating or wing defense. And then they have deficiencies in all of these other areas. Um, to be expected. These are teenagers, a lot of them, 20, 22 years old. I'm about to be 25. And but the first draft I covered, I was 19 and DeJounte was 19. And, um, it's crazy to think about these kids. I love draft night because it's these kids who have worked really, really hard to put themselves in positions to succeed so that they can then provide for their families. It's a wonderful thing. And all of these kids have worked really hard. Even LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball is somebody who I will admit I have slept on because I was just sick of hearing about his family. Um, but kid can ball. He's filling out. Um, he'll probably wind up being like 6'8", and if he bulks up on that frame with all the skills he has and fixes that jump shot, he's going to be a really great player. I hear you, Dominic, on not wanting to draft a guard, but there are some guards in this draft who are 6'7" and taller. Denny is another guy who functions as a guard. Denny in any offense is going to be either a primary or secondary initiator. Um, too much skill passing the ball and scoring to not use that. So, um, but the thing is, he has the size to defend multiple positions on the wing. That's the one thing that this Spurs team, this group of Spurs players, I don't know about you guys, let me know what you think in the comments, but when I was watching this team in the bubble, the thing that jumped out to me was this team has a bunch of really good guards. They need more guys who are taller and bulkier and can switch with the guards and defend multiple positions. That was one of the biggest areas of need that I saw. So my draft analysis has mainly focused on those guys who I see the Spurs taking because they know that they need players like that. Um, there are some good guards in this draft. I've watched some of the tape. Jackson on the Big Fun team just said that he wants the French Manu Ginobili. I don't know about that. I mean, he's good. Killian Hayes is good, but I don't know about drafting another guard unless he is an otherworldly athlete and has ridiculous size for a guard. Could play the three in the NBA and not be out of position. So, but as far as players like that go, this draft has a bunch of them. We've already talked about Denny, Obi Toppin, Onyeka Okongwu out of USC is 6'9", 245 with a 7'1" wingspan. Probably the best wing defender, pure wing defender in the draft. Needs a lot of work with his shot, his offensive game. He's, he doesn't really have an outside game. He is basically an undersized center. But, if he develops that shot in that outside game, he could play the four and be that guy to play a whole bunch of defense. Precious Achua out of Memphis, 6'9", 225, 7'2" wingspan. Another one of these guys who could definitely make an impact in that sort of role. So the Spurs are going to have options wherever they pick. Pat Williams, another guy, and Naismith. Yep, absolutely. All good players. So that's why I think this talk about how this is a weak draft. If it is a weak draft by overall draft standards, it's not a weak draft by Spurs standards. First of all, they're picking somewhere in the top 14. They don't really do that ever. Second of all, the players that they should be looking for are going to be available. So it's one of those drafts where on the face of it, it might not look like, oh yeah, this is stacked with talent. Um, but in reality, it's stacked with talent that can make meaningful contributions to the Spurs roster. Um, so yeah, exactly, Mike. There are absolutely players in this draft that we're going to be looking back a couple of years from now and be like, how did that guy not get picked? Um, yeah, JD, Luka. Uh, we can talk about Luka Šamanić for a second. The last Spurs draft pick that was the high first round pick, 19th pick, and Spurs took a project. Skinny, tall, European kid who has all of the bones of and makings of a great player. And it's just a matter of refining his skills and his game and his body for the NBA. And he's not there yet. And that's fine because they picked him when he was 19, you know? Um, so it's there are a lot of really young stars in the NBA who might make you think, you might take for granted the talent of these young guys. Luka Šamanić, uh, not Luka Šamanić, Luka Doncic. You've seen what he's doing against the Clippers in this series, playing against Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and he's 22 and looks unstoppable. That's the exception to the rule. Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, fantastic rookies, teenagers who came in and immediately made an impact at the NBA level. That's not most guys. There's rare talents that are identifiable early on. But there are guys in these drafts that can develop one day into very serviceable, impactful NBA players. Um, it's a really interesting thing when you take into consideration the development aspect, because the Spurs, you could say that they have found diamonds in the rough in the draft, but you could also say that their development system helps. It's a combination. They scout good players, they pick good players, and then they develop those players well. Saw something about Derek White in the comments there. Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. Kid was a senior. It was a pick that was panned at the time by some people, saying, they could have picked somebody younger who had a higher ceiling. And like, he's got a whole bunch of good NBA skills, but what does he do at an elite level? That's silly. That's silly and reductive analysis, saying, okay, you can only pick a kid who's 19 years old. Because look at what Derek White has turned into with his time in Austin, his time developing on this team, to now being a knockdown three-point shooter and one of the better wing defenders in the league at the guard position. What does he do at an elite level? Now, defend, initiate offense, shoot, pretty important things. So it's important to remember that these kids are not finished products on draft night. That's something I think a lot of people lose sight of. All of these kids will develop. Some of them won't develop enough. Some of them won't pan out. But some of them are going to develop to such a level that they're forces in this league. And the Spurs are in a position to pick one of those players. It's a fantastically interesting draft from that perspective, covering the Spurs team. Because most time, I can't even really do effective draft prep because so much shuffling happens on the night of. You never really know who's going to be available at 29 or 27. It's very much a crapshoot at that point. But in this draft, it's pretty simplified because there are pretty definitely a top 20 players here, that are all really talented. As far as trading up for Denny goes, I don't know. I don't know if the Spurs will be willing to trade up. I don't know what pieces they would be willing to part with. because it would have to be one of the young guys. It would have to be Derek or DeJounte or Lonnie or Keldon. Did you guys see that? I won't mention the name of the outlet. You'll know what I'm talking about. There's a proposed trade for if the Spurs got the top pick that involved them sending the top pick and Keldon Johnson and Rudy Gay and Patty Mills to Cleveland for Kevin Love and his contract and Colin Sexton. It was horrible. I threw my phone. I was upset. Makes absolutely no sense. But as this thing goes, the Spurs may be in a position where they think somebody that they want is going to be available lower, so they can take a trade down if that's what they want to do. If they get a top 11, if they get the 11th pick, that's an asset that some teams might be interested in if they're looking to do the same thing. We all know how much can happen on draft night, right? Kawhi Leonard was picked by the Pacers and acquired in a draft night trade for that was the Spurs' last pick that was this high, and that was the 15th pick. So tonight will be at the very least 14. Celtics are the 14th pick. I'm watching on a stream here. Might be a little delayed. I see a comment that the 11th pick is the Spurs. We'll check the screen and see if that's accurate. It's Celtics, Pelicans, and then Kings. And looks like the Spurs will be the 11th pick, as expected. So this was the likeliest outcome for San Antonio. This was pretty much expected. Disappointing for sure. Could have that 1 in 10 chance of getting into the top 4 would have been pretty cool. But here we are, the 11th pick. San Antonio Spurs have the 11th pick in the NBA draft. Now it's time to talk about what should they do with it. So I'm going to pull up my list of players here. We can talk through pros and cons for everybody. And again, I want to hear in the comments who you guys want to talk about. I'm excited to get down to business because these are really exciting players. Do you guys want to talk about Denny first? Let's talk about Denny. So Denny Abdia, 6'10", 225, and 6'10", 6'11 wingspan. Played for Maccabi Tel Aviv, out of Israel. This guy, picture like Boris Diaw, but like the springy, young, skinny version before he was the large NBA champion that we know and love today. He's fast. He is really quick in transition. Plays both parts of the pick and roll well. His passing is at an extremely high level. He shot like 43% from 3 and 57% from the floor. Really good. Just overall a really, really good player. The Spurs would have to trade up to get him because his stock has risen. He's going to be a top 5-ish player. You guys have talked about Obi Toppin before. An ideal pick and pop big man, pick and roll big man. Guy lives above the rim. Just incredibly talented. Needs some work on the defensive end of the floor. But, that'll happen. I don't think the Spurs are going to take LaMelo Ball. So we can skip him for a second. Just know that he's actually really good. And he will be really good in the NBA if he ever figures his shot out. James Wiseman. Interesting question, Marco. James Wiseman, center out of Memphis. 7'1", 240 pounds. Kid's a freak athlete. He could put up 20 and 10 a game a couple of years into his career. He's that kind of dynamic athlete at the center position. If he falls, I don't think he'll be available at 11. But if he falls a bit, the Spurs might trade up a bit to get him. It depends if that's in their plan. Let's go down now to some of the guys who are more in the Spurs range. So Isaac Okoro was mentioned before. 6'6", freshman out of Auburn. This guy was defending the best player on the opposing team most nights. Really, really solid defender at the individual level, at the team level. He's smart. He understands basketball at a very high level, especially for somebody his age. Only shot 29% for three for the year. But any prospect who has a jump shot that isn't great at this point, I will apply the same logic to of the Spurs have Chip England, who is the best shot coach in basketball. So that does not scare me when I see that a guy, has not shot the ball particularly well in college, especially if he's shown a willingness to shoot it and just hasn't gotten those shots to fall. So when you look at Okoro at 6'6", he's going to be about the same size as Keldon. So, you can play guys like that at the 4. He's going to be a small forward at the NBA level. Obviously, it depends what happens with DeMar DeRozan. What's he doing? But I wouldn't expect him to be a starter, certainly, for the Spurs next year if they did draft him. He'd probably spend some time in Austin. He'd probably spend more time in San Antonio than most rookies. Yes, Taco Auditor. Thank you for this comment. Neesmith and Vassell. I think Vassell might be the best 3-and-D guy in this draft. I think the Spurs would be lucky to get him. Maybe not necessarily lucky, but they would be thrilled with that pick, I'm sure, if he was available and they've decided that they want him. 42% from 3. And one of the better wing defenders in college basketball. I need to watch more of the tape on him. But he's a little bigger. He's 6'7". He needs to fill out a little bit, but most of these teenagers do. And then, although he was a sophomore, but then another guy is Aaron Neesmith, who shot 52% from 3. I see the Timberwolves have won the lottery. That's interesting. Not the Warriors. I know that was a thing that people were worried about. But that's honestly, those are all other teams that they can have their own discussions on what's going on there. But back to the Spurs here. Aaron Neesmith, another one of these guys in the 6'6" to 6'7" range, who's a wing defender and three-point shooter first. He is one of those guys who can guard multiple positions. Could go top 15. Definitely sort of on the lower end of the lottery as far as his projection goes. But he is definitely going to be an option for the Spurs. I've seen mock drafts taking Cole Anthony. He's 6'3". I'm not interested. Is Vassell too skinny? Right now, yeah. I think he's at 6'7", less than 200 pounds was what he's listed at. So I think he is one of those guys who needs to fill out again. These guys are not finished products. I wouldn't shy away from drafting a guy because he hadn't put on muscle yet, any more than I'd shy away from drafting a guy because uh, his jump shot form isn't right yet. Um, the things that the Spurs I know are looking for in their players are not necessarily NBA ready skills, but NBA ready attitudes. Who are these high character guys who are going to come in, work hard, allow themselves to be coached, um, and that's something that you can really only do through the interview process. And the Spurs have done a pretty good job over the years of identifying those guys. Um, there are not many players in this draft who are lazy. You don't get to a level like this if you are. But at the end of the day, the Spurs, if they choose in this range, if they don't, unless some guard who everybody thought was going to go much higher falls all the way down, and they take him, and because they know that people want to trade for him, unless something like that happens, I do believe that they're going to look for a larger difference maker on the wing. I'm going to be focusing on that, what the Spurs might do, who they should pick, really diving into the tape and giving you my informed power ranking of my big board of who I think the Spurs should be taking. But in the meantime, I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys have to say. If there's anybody that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about, Pat Williams is another guy out of Florida State, 6'8", 225, 6'11" wingspan, high IQ, high motor guy. He's one of those people who could make an impact. He can kind of do both parts of the pick and roll, which is interesting. Like, he's a versatile player on both ends of the floor. So he's an intriguing prospect. I've seen him kind of later in the first round, but also a little higher in some mock drafts, which also are kind of nonsense. I don't trust any mock drafts because they're silly, especially before the lottery. At least now we know where these teams are going to be picking. Mock drafts where they figure out, they guess where the teams are going to pick and then guess who they might pick in this fictional order make no sense to me. But now we know that the Spurs will have the 11th pick. Minnesota Timberwolves will have the first pick. And we've got a couple of months before we figure out who it'll be. The coverage is going to continue on Ken's 5 and Big Fun Pod. We're going to record a post-draft lottery draft special. I know Evan Klosky has thoughts. I know that Jackson Floyd has some thoughts, so I'm excited to get their thoughts. And again, excited to get your thoughts. So let me know. My name is Tom Petrini. It's at Real Tom Petrini on Twitter. And I'm always happy to talk about basketball, especially Spurs basketball. And I'm happy that I've been talking Spurs basketball with you guys for the last little while. That's going to be it for me tonight. But definitely keep it locked in, and we will have any updates that you may need as a Spurs fan. All right? Have a good night.